The third largest company in the world ignored Michael Saylor. On Tuesday, over 99% of Microsoft shareholders made a shocking decision based on the success of MicroStrategy. So, will it be a decision these shareholders regret? Let's dive into the 99% of the Microsoft shareholders that voted against putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Now, what we do know is that the SEC, the Security and Exchange Commission, showed that less than 1% of shareholders voted for a motion to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet. The motion was proposed by the National Center for Public Policy and was promoted by Michael Saylor, the man, the myth, the legend. So only about 0.5% of shareholders voted for this proposal. And it seems like Microsoft was looking to not put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So, how big is Microsoft? How big of a blunder is this? How big is this potentially? Would it have been for Bitcoin and putting it on the balance sheet? Well, Microsoft is the third largest company, as I mentioned on the intro there, with the third largest market cap at $3.325 trillion. Now, I think that this is pretty shocking simply because of the success that we've seen from MicroStrategy. We've seen MicroStrategy's share absolutely explode over this past year, and it's been dominating Microsoft. Dominating so much that, they were actually considering making this move in the first place. Now, just how dominant was MicroStrategy over Microsoft? Well, look at this chart here, which highlights the differences between the two. This dark line on the bottom is Microsoft. The top line is MicroStrategy. So you can see by the end of this year, Microsoft, pretty good year, will return 21.2%, while MicroStrategy is up 496.5%. I've shown you guys the Microsoft or the MicroStrategy flywheel, where essentially building more and more debt to buy more Bitcoin. And thus, as Bitcoin increases, MicroStrategy's market cap increases, thus the weight in the indices it's in increases, so on and so forth. So they keep repeating the cycle to buy more Bitcoin. So in my opinion, it is very surprising that they're rejecting Michael Saylor and his case to buy Bitcoin for Microsoft. And traditional news media outlets are even picking this up as well, where they're showing that, Saylor said during his Microsoft shareholders meeting that the software company could convert cash flows, dividends, and buybacks and debts into Bitcoin. And, highlighting Saylor's net worth has grown by billions of dollars as his company has plunged into Bitcoin. And the shareholders then voted against that. Now, I'm not sure if the audio will be able to come through this. So I see we've got somebody in the chat. So let me know if you can hear this. BP. If you can hear this, then either way, even if you cannot hear this, I think it's important to highlight this section right here, that it's the greatest transformation of wealth and Bitcoin is digital capital. So what Michael Saylor really highlighted here is that, we've got gold at 16 trillion. Bitcoin is still small at 2 trillion. But out of all of these different indices, it's still a very small, amount relative to, what, relative to these other assets there. So putting Bitcoin in the balance sheet of Microsoft would have greatly benefited Microsoft as a company. And I think it's going to be a decision that they regret. But I do agree here with BP here that Microsoft does not deserve Bitcoin, so that there'll be a company that ends up sinking here. And I guess time will tell, right? Time will tell just how drastic of a blunder this is for Microsoft going forward. And I think the other, shocking surprise is that, only 0.5% voted for this for yes. But I also, am kind of I guess, not super surprised here because, with the approval for this, we have, you know, 28,000 or 28, excuse me, 28 million for, and then 5.14 trillion no. And then 22 million or 28 million for, 22 million abstained, and then broker non-votes. So it looks like this is based on the amount of shares that are being held in each of for each person, not necessarily a shareholder. Where if I were to hold 1,000 shares of Microsoft and BP over here holds one, it's not going to be the same weighted vote. So the wealthy individuals aren't necessarily buying Microsoft to see huge ends and ends of returns. I think like the average Microsoft stockholder is not going to be somebody who's looking into Bitcoin or really, kind of going forward that. I think it's going to be the old traditional kind of Warren Buffett value investing type of person, opposed to, more of, somebody who's more willing to take risks, which initially Bitcoin looks like a risk. I think that it's going to be a risk for any company to not take into Bitcoin. So, as this highlights here, it's not all votes weighted equally as Bitcoin does with, how it runs its node and everything like that. It's more on based on, who holds the most amount of shares and they get the most amount of votes. So it's unfortunate that a small percentage, only 0.55% voted for Bitcoin to become a reserve asset for Microsoft. But, we've seen Microsoft, start to blunder. I mean, they did all right this entire year, right? I showed you guys year to date. They're up about 20% as it stands, which is a decent return if you're looking for something kind of stable. But, with all of that, as I highlighted, the differences between MicroStrategy and Microsoft are night and day, right? I mean, a 20% return here, and then MicroStrategy, on nearly a 500% return. So making the comparison between the two is just kind of insulting to MicroStrategy at this point because of how much better that they've been doing. And I mean, obviously, it's a big part of how they line up their balance sheet and by holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And so, we've seen MicroStrategy's market cap now start to climb up here to 102.73 billion. So it's going to get up to, it's not quite the behemoth that is Microsoft, where it's 3.3 trillion. We have 102.73 billion. But the more Bitcoin that MicroStrategy is able to purchase, able to accumulate, and able to bring on, the higher that market cap's going to climb, and the higher that market cap, or the closer that market cap's going to get to Microsoft, especially if Microsoft does not, get this Bitcoin strategy under wraps here in the near future. So I think it's going to be something that they regret. It is positive in my eyes that this is an initial talking point here. For Microsoft, that they actually had to make this vote. Now we see Amazon shareholders demanding that they get some Bitcoin on their balance sheet as well. So I think this is going to start the company FOMO that we're going to see here in 2025, where every company is going to need some sort of Bitcoin strategy. And it's because MicroStrategy is making such a big wave. I mean, look at when they adopted this Bitcoin strategy here. In 21, right? I mean, they started just drastically going up. I mean, look at this. This chart is showing parabolic returns. Parabolic. I mean, this is insane. It's not like MicroStrategy was, not around for quite some time. I mean, it's a company that's been around and valued at $1 billion since 1998. And you see it just absolutely skyrocket here to now 10x that. And it seems like majority of that movement has come since 2020 in the past 4 years. So it's going to continue to make waves as MicroStrategy is still going to continue to, make turn some heads and everything like that. And I think the flywheel that Michael Saylor is implementing is something that not very many people are talking about or taking a look at. And part of that is joining these giant indices. I mean, how can you not notice Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy joining the Nasdaq 100, which is the top 100 stocks that are non-banking and non-financial company stocks? Top 100. So it's usually the tech, it's usually the ones that are growing the quickest, that people want the most exposure to. So as this continues to go on, Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy are going to obtain more of a percentage of those indices. They would trigger a purchase of sales of about $451 billion here, is what they're estimating as they've joined and came onto it onto Friday. So, and it's been for one simple reason, right? Even Yahoo Finance is highlighting it. MicroStrategy has morphed into a levered bet on Bitcoin attached to a small software company that many say has no business being among the most 100 important the 100 most important stocks on the Nasdaq. I mean, the idea of an index, as it is supposed to be, represent faithfully the body of stocks that are in the universe, who is buying any large company, is reflected by the index. So I think that very many people are now paying close attention because the indexes and the indices, like, shareholders are just vying for this. They're really looking to get something of this nature here. And they all want exposure to some sort of Bitcoin, whether it's MicroStrategy getting a levered bet on Bitcoin, or buying one of these indices like the Nasdaq 100 now. They want some sort of exposure to Bitcoin. And the S&P 500 has had MicroStrategy in it. MicroStrategy was one of, if not the best performing stock in the S&P 500 in this past year as well. So, what else do we need to know from this is that, it is kind of interesting that out of everything, Microsoft has been very conservative with how they are approaching their, reserve balance here. Because, other companies who I've lined out here, right? So MicroStrategy and NVIDIA lead. Well, look at the top market cap companies here, companies by market cap. Oh, well, would you look at here? NVIDIA. NVIDIA has shot up, and is now the second largest company with their by market cap, just passing Microsoft this year. And part of what they're betting on is Bitcoin as well, right? So NVIDIA has driven quote unquote crypto innovation, but NVIDIA is looking at AI, Bitcoin, and everything else. And so these companies are really paying attention to the massive amounts of tech influence to help raise their stock price. While Microsoft, on the other hand, is sitting on the sidelines and getting left behind. So I think that this is kind of interesting where, it is a tech company, but it has not been a very forward thinking tech company. And it's, as BP said earlier, it's something where, if you don't innovate, you're going to get left behind. And then, Microsoft could be a company that ends up sinking, excuse me. But, we've also had, Bitcoin proxy MicroStrategy join the Nasdaq 100 heavily traded QQQ index, right? So one of the most traded indexes on the stock market is the QQQ. It'll be joining the Nasdaq 100 effectively December 23rd. And then it'll allow the Invesco QQQ will be automatic buys of the stock. Shares of MicroStrategy have soared more than 500% in 2024. So like I said, everybody is noticing the share price, the massive amounts of returns, everything that is going on, with this as well. And it can't be denied at this point. It cannot be denied that, MicroStrategy is, one of, if not the best, company stocks in the entire stock or New York Stock Exchange this past year. And that's in large part because of their Bitcoin strategy, and the Bitcoin price ripping and rolling here. So as it's sitting here today, we've got the Bitcoin price just sitting in a little over 101,000. As we've had it for this year to date, we have Bitcoin up 139%, which I think is kind of interesting to note here that Bitcoin is up 139%. But on the flip side of things, we've got MicroStrategy up nearly 500%. So it's not all correlated where obviously, MicroStrategy as it increases, as that increases, it's pretty closely tied to Bitcoin. But MicroStrategy, if you look at it relative in fiat terms, has outperformed Bitcoin this year by nearly a 5x multiple. So it is pretty interesting that seeing all that they have not considered potentially doing that, right? So, but with Bitcoin, there's a lot of very powerful aspects of Bitcoin and the just freedom technology that Michael Saylor lined out when he was talking about, or when he was talking to the Microsoft shareholders. Part of that is just escaping the traditional system and the traditional fiat rails. Well, health insurance is one of the biggest issues that it comes to the fiat rails. They've been massively in the news. I know we're on YouTube here, so I'm not going to dive too deep into what everything happened, but everybody knows of the story that is, making waves on the internet. So if you take a dive into health insurance, one of the big issues that came out there was like the United Healthcare had denied over a third of their claims with that. So, Crowd Health is a cheaper alternative that you can join with by using promo code Green Candle and get the first 3 months for $99. And you can essentially join all these other people here. So how it works is that Crowd Health is not an insurance company, but a platform and a community that will empower you with a crowdfunding tool and a wealth of resources to effectively manage your healthcare cost. It's essentially a decentralized way to go about health insurance, right? So decentralize the money, decentralize health insurance, decentralize these ways. So use promo code Green Candle, get the first 3 months for $99. I'm using Crowd Health now because of, now I'm off on my own doing this Green Candle thing on my own. So it's more affordable. It'll allow me to get the healthcare that I need and be protected for a rainy day. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, get your Bitcoin off an exchange. Don't be the type of person that is holding your Bitcoin on an exchange. And if that's something that scares you, you can go to the bitcoinway.com/green candle. You can set up an appointment with them anytime, any day of the week. They got people working all over the globe, all over in different countries. So anytime a time zone that you're in, you can find a good time for you to do that. So you go to the bitcoinway.com/green candle. And with that, they will help you buy Bitcoin, get it off an exchange, properly store it, and take it a step further. Make sure that your computer is completely safe, defending it from any type of cybersecurity attacks. And lastly, if you're looking to get a Plan B passport, you can definitely do that as well. And so, with that, don't forget, don't be like Microsoft and don't reject Bitcoin. Embrace Bitcoin and the power of it. Be like the 99, or be the opposite. Be like the 0.5% of Microsoft shareholders, and utilize Bitcoin in the best way possible. And thank you guys all for coming out. Shout out to Knox Bill in the chat, waving to me. Smash the like button, smash the subscribe button if you haven't already. Tell a friend to tell a friend, and I will see you guys all at the next one.